Question 2 on the Elizabeth paper will ask you what was important about, and it will ask you about something from the Elizabethan units. So that part of the question always stays the same. You can see I've coloured it in red there, that's the stem of the question, but they can ask you pretty much anything on the course. You can see previous questions on the right hand side. Sometimes I'll ask you about what it's in relation to Elizabethan England, as you can see I've put in bold, and sometimes it'll just be what to do with the Golden Age, for example, or plots against Elizabeth. So you've got to be aware of what the question wants. In this one today, we're going to look at Elizabeth I and her Privy Council and why that was so important. Now, this is quite similar to the health question, why was something significant? Only this time we don't have to look at the short and long term. It's just why was it important during Elizabeth's reign? Now, a few things to think about here. It's an 8-mark question. We know we're aiming for 2 paragraphs, 10 minutes of writing. We're looking to bring in our own precise own knowledge to show an understanding of these events. And the key bit for this question is, why was it important? What happened because of this? What changed? How did it help Elizabeth? Why was it a threat? What could have happened? What action was taken? Why is it important? Now, for higher levels, as always, we're linking to the wider context. We're showing an understanding of Elizabethan England, not just the Privy Council, but the general what Elizabethan England was like at the time. So, the Privy Council, what was important about it? There was a few ideas we could bring in here. We can bring some of these into 2 paragraphs. The Privy Council, we know, gave advice to Elizabeth on the range of issues that she faced during her reign. They also allowed Elizabeth to have political control and balance. She picked a range of people to be that 19-man Privy Council, and that meant she kept important people on side like landowners, and also meant she got a range of views. And it was the Privy Council's job to help her look strong. That's really important. Remember, at this time, Elizabethan England is a patriarchal society. It is male-dominated. She needs to look strong. The Privy Council can help her do that in a number of ways. So we need 2 of these ideas into 2 paragraphs. Now, when we're writing our first paragraph, as always, we're going to give a theme straight away. We're going to mirror the wording of the question. So you can see I've done that here with colour coding. One reason Elizabeth I's Privy Council was important was it helped Elizabeth to run the country by giving her advice on a range of issues, both domestic and international. Now at this point I need to briefly explain the facts in the question to show knowledge. Now this isn't the main part of the question, it's just to show some understanding, so I'm only going to write a few sentences. The Privy Council were 19 men who acted as Elizabeth's advisors. These were people selected by Elizabeth to meet most days and discuss issues the country faced. Now I'm on to the main focus of the question. Why was it important? What did it lead to? Why is it needed? What did it change? There are things to be thinking about here, and this should be the main part of the writing. So here, this was important as Elizabeth faced a number of short and long-term problems during her reign, such as threats of rebellion or rivalry with Spain. The Privy Council would give Elizabeth advice on a range of issues to help her to understand the best course of action to take. This would include very important figures such as Sir William Cecil, who was Elizabeth's Secretary of State and leading Privy Councillor, who had regular contacts with the Queen. Elizabeth had selected a range of people with different viewpoints, and this would mean they rarely agreed together on a course of action. This allowed Elizabeth to have a range of ideas and see different sides of debates. Because Elizabeth had a small Privy Council with just 19 members, it meant that she had more control over it, and could ensure that they knew she would not rush major decisions. And now I'm just going to link back to conclude that paragraph to tighten it up. Therefore, one reason that Elizabeth's Privy Council was important was that they gave Elizabeth help to run the country and gave a range of views for different issues she faced. And that's what that paragraph would look like there. And if you can see, you've got 2 colour codes going on here. The red is linked to why it's important, what they do, why they matter, which is the focus of the question. And in blue, it's just that detail. I've got that understanding, that knowledge, that precise detail. So I'm talking about people like Sir William Cecil being Secretary of State. I've mentioned the threats of rebellion, the rivalry of Spain. I understand what's going on in England at this time. It's not just focused on the Privy Council, but the issues that they dealt with. And then I'd need to do that again. So here's my second paragraph. Another reason the Privy Council was important was due to how they helped Elizabeth keep her authority over the country. The Privy Council were expected to always support Elizabeth, regardless of how they felt about her decisions. For example, Sir Francis Walsingham was key in keeping Elizabeth safe from Catholic threats using his spy network. The Privy Council would also spread propaganda to make Elizabeth seem strong and help defend her quickly if threats arose, such as raising an army quickly during the revolt of the Northern Earls in 1569, or Robert Cecil removing supporters of Essex during his failed rebellion. They would also control what was debated in Parliament to ensure critics of Elizabeth found it difficult to get support. Making Elizabeth seem strong was essential, as England was a patriarchal society. By giving advice to Elizabeth, but letting her have the final decision and supporting her completely, helped Elizabeth to maintain the image of a strong monarch, which she needed to do. Therefore, another reason the Privy Council was important was to help Elizabeth keep authority and control. So, similar thing here again, we can see where I've got that precise detail. I'm naming people and saying about what people's roles were, and then I'm explaining why it's important, why it matters, why she needs this Privy Council. And so that's what our answer looks like. We've got 2 paragraphs there, about 10 minutes of writing. We're always focused on importance. If you look at how often I've got the word important in there, I'm focused on that question. I'm explaining why it matters. I'm not saying just what the Privy Council were, but why they were needed. So just to wrap up this video, what do we need to do for this one? Well, it's that key part again, an 8 marker, 2 paragraphs, 10 minutes if we're looking to get good marks. We're bringing in precise own knowledge to show our understanding, but we're explaining why it was important, that key focus of the question. What happened because of this? What did it lead to? And then for our higher levels, we're linking again to the wider context. We're not just focused on the Privy Council in this answer, but we're showing an understanding of Elizabethan England overall, the rivalry with Spain, the religious conflict, the patriarchal society.